Welcome back to County Connection. I'm Jason Gray, and I'm sitting down today with Chris Prager from the Campbell County Fire Department. And it's January. It's the new year, and general fire safety tips, I think, is what the topic was for today.
Absolutely. General fire safety is very important. Prevention is something that everybody should think about. A lot of the time, you become complacent with it. The big thing that we say, especially in prevention, is there's no statistic that will tell you how many fires you've prevented. You can't count what you don't know didn't happen.
Sure.
So a lot of the basic features that we really wanted to talk about, or at least touch on, would be like your smoke alarms. Having smoke alarms in homes is a fantastic way to at least early notify you if something's happening. The biggest thing we run into is just how many should you have in a house. And it really depends on your house size, how many bedrooms, and how many floors. A good rule of thumb would be one in each bedroom, one outside of the common areas, your common sleeping areas, and then on each level, at least one on each level. That would then basically give you, with a 3-bedroom house and a hallway and a living room, you would have 3 for your bedroom, another one outside of the common area to notify those in the bedrooms, and then one in a living room. So you would have 5 on one floor. If you have an open concept basement with it, you would then put one in the basement in a middle area, which would give you 6 total in a home. The good thing with that is, now that technology is advancing, is you could go with like a 10-year lithium-ion battery or a 10-year battery smoke alarm.
Sure.
So you don't have to replace 9 volts or listen to a beep every year.
Yeah.
Because I find, of course, it never happens in the middle of the day. It always happens at 2 a.m. when you're fast asleep, and then you're hearing a random beeping, and you got to find it. And you got work in the morning. You know, that's what happens. But the 10-year battery ones are fantastic. As long as it's UL listed and rated for the purpose of what you're using it for, they're great. You can get them so they're also hardwired in, so they have the attachment, the plug, because there are a few different style plugs that people can use, or you can buy them so they're just standalone, and that would be a great way to do it. Going along with smoke detection would be carbon monoxide. Having carbon monoxide alarms in your house is fantastic. The best way to think about it would be one on each level, or in the first room served by like an HVAC or your furnace.
Okay.
Because in reality, a lot of what you're going to have is carbon monoxide is going to come from some type of appliance or exhaust or something of that nature.
Sure.
So like a gas furnace or a gas water heater has to vent out that exhaust from somewhere, because you are burning something. And that's where your carbon monoxide comes from. Sometimes it's not venting appropriately, leaks into your house, gets pushed through your house. You can't smell it. It's odorless. It's tasteless. People start to kind of get the base symptoms: headache, grogginess. You're feeling like you're starting to come down with maybe a cold. And that's where like a carbon monoxide alarm could come in and really help with early detection. And so you can get combination smoke alarms and carbon monoxide alarms, put that in that central area. Or you could buy like a battery operated carbon monoxide alarm, or even a standalone plug-in carbon monoxide alarm. Some of them give you readouts depending on how much you want to spend on them. But getting something in your house is a good way to just start that prevention.
So if none of your appliances, if you don't have natural gas, do you still need a carbon monoxide alarm then?
If you have like an attached garage, yeah, I would personally. Exhaust from the vehicle could leak into the house.
Sure.
Sometimes, it doesn't happen very often, but maybe your car turns on, or you start the auto start and you don't back the car out, or you don't open the garage door. Personally, I will back my car out in the morning if I want to start it, and then auto start it outside so the exhaust isn't anywhere near my house. But if you have all electric appliances, you really don't have any carbon monoxide being produced into it, so you may not necessarily need it. But it's not necessarily a bad thing to have.
Sure.
If you get one of the combination units for carbon and smoke, in reality, it would only work if it really needed to, but you're not really changing anything out of that.
True.
So that's something you can do. And the biggest thing with those is just follow manufacturer specifications for location, installation, and then even replacing it. Most manufacturers give you about 10 years of life on those, whether it's battery operated or the 10-year internal battery. You get about 10 years out of them before the potential for the sensing device to become less sensitive.
Okay.
Which then could lead to less early notification, essentially.
Sure.
So, like I said, most manufacturers are 10 years. Pay attention to your devices and kind of go from there.
Okay.
Something that a lot of people don't do would be testing those devices. Generally, most manufacturers recommend either like a 1-month, a 3-month, or a 6-month test cycle. So you should be pressing on your devices to verify they're working. Because if you don't test them, you don't necessarily know until maybe you burn some food or something of that nature. So those are the big things. The last thing I like to touch on would be like your fire extinguishers.
Sure.
Fire extinguishers generally last for a while, 7 to 10 years also, depending on the manufacturer. So a lot of people have them from 10, 15 years ago when they bought the house. Maybe it's time to update them. But a lot of them sit underneath the cabinet in the kitchen where you don't look at it.
Sure.
You don't check on it. Sometimes the powder can be compact. Sometimes the pressure can fail over years, but the gauge is stuck in that green position, so it still looks like it. Some of them, like if they have like the metal head or they're a larger one, can be serviced by an actual serviceable company. Some of them have like the plastic style heads, cannot be serviced, so you just have to purchase a new one. So I always recommend just checking it every year. Take your extinguisher, flip it upside down, make sure you can feel the powder move. If it doesn't move, tap the bottom, whether it be with your palm or something to try and get that to break loose a little bit. Shake it, check the gauge, then make sure it's accessible. The biggest thing that you don't want to do is in an emergency forget where it's at. Which, when your adrenaline is kicking and something is happening in your house, generally your first thought is to get out of the house. So if it's underneath the cabinet, are you really going to think I need to climb under my cabinet or I want to get my family out? So I always recommend putting it by like a door that you're going to use to get out, whether it be the front door, the rear door. Try not to block it with anything. Make sure it's visible and accessible at all times. So those are 3 good things that you can do in a house that would lead to prevention or early notification of a potential problem. Now with like home security systems, you can get early notification if you pay for your subscription to have like a monitoring company through one of those security systems or security companies, and that would even give you earlier notification, and they could call 911 for you. There are some security cameras out there that can recognize flame and just infrared wise, and then call 911 depending on what type of monitoring there is. Now, I don't know the specifics on all of those, but it's something that the technology's out there. You just have to search for it. But you can always easily get things like that. It's just really dependent on the cost. But for cheaper and easier, and at least something just to get people by, I think just smoke alarms and carbon monoxide alarms and just a fire extinguisher is a great beginning to that, for sure. So, and especially leading into like these cold months. So you talked about what if you don't have any appliances that do, like you have your basic normal heating, electric appliances.
Yeah.
Well, we always think about what happens if you have small heaters. What happens if people tend to use, if it's extremely cold. I've seen it where some people use buddy heaters inside, like those camping heaters.
Oh.
Those put off carbon monoxide.
Oh, yeah.
So if you're used to having nothing but electrical appliances and you don't have a carbon monoxide, but say you just want that little extra heat, and so you bring in the buddy heater because you've used it while camping, you don't have that airflow necessary that you would in a tent that has constant air exchange. You just basically would be putting carbon monoxide into your house. It's a good thing to have something like that. So it really depends on what you're using. Now, not a lot of people use buddy heaters, and I think a lot of people would say, I would never do something like that, which is great. We don't want people to do things like that, because then it could do harm to them and their family.
Sure.
But space heaters in general. The biggest thing to remember when you're using appliances like that, especially in cold weather, would be follow manufacturer specifications. A lot of them require a certain space around them to be clear and free. Some of them even require to be up and off of the ground and off of something that could potentially catch fire or even melt, something of that nature. It really depends on what type you're buying, and the manufacturers that are listed and they put their products through testing will tell you what they should be doing. And I think that's the biggest thing, is just following manufacturer specifications. So when you put a space heater too close to something and you fall asleep, you forget about it. Sure, the space heater may only go to 80, 90 degrees, but it's that radiant heat that just sits there that builds up.
Sure.
And as you get to those points, depending on the materials, that's where you could have a failure. Or if you have like a faulty heater and it tips over and it just keeps running, and you're on your way out the door and you forget to turn it off or check it, you could have a potential fire because maybe the safety features have failed on it. Maybe it's older. And you've got that old metal style that puts off a whole lot of heat, but when it tips over, it's the whole hot front and it's going to melt your carpet.
Yeah.
It's one of those things where you just have to be cognizant when doing prevention. And if you become complacent, that's when things really start to fall apart. And that's when you're used to, it hasn't happened to me before, I don't know somebody it's happened to, it's probably not going to happen, is the mindset that could start that snowball effect of things to go wrong. And that's really what we want the public to know, is just to really pay attention to those prevention measures. Pay attention to what you have in your house and what you're using, and try not to overload things, or at least set up early notification so if something does go wrong, you're notified before you really, really need to be notified, and you're in potential harm's way.
Okay.
So, and if there are any questions or concerns, they can definitely reach out to the fire department. The public is free to call us with questions. We'll be there to answer anything and try and help the best we can. Fire is a terrifying thing, and it's a difficult thing to deal with. And I think we really want to work on making sure people know that we'll give the answers, the best answers we can, as quickly as possible to help them prevent what could become a tragedy. So, yeah, that's about it.
All right. Well, thank you very much for joining us today.
Thank you so much for having me.